If you were trapped in the middle of a city that was suddenly overrun by flesh-eating zombies, genetic abominations, and an 8-foot-tall Frankenstein's monster with a rocket launcher whose only goal was to erase you from existence, what the hell would you do? So grab your lockpicks and maybe a sandwich as we break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to survive the zombie apocalypse in Resident Evil 3. Meet Jill Valentine, former star of the Raccoon City Police Department's Special Tactics and Rescue Services, or STARS for short. In the summer of 1998, Jill and her team were sent to investigate the cause of strange occurrences that led them to an abandoned mansion far out in the Arklay Mountains. The place turned out to be full of zombies and other terrifying creatures, the products of twisted experiments with a newly developed bioweapon called the T-Virus, created by Umbrella Pharmaceuticals in their top-secret underground lab. Jill and her partners eventually escaped the mansion and destroyed the facility, but the virus escaped as well. When they told their story to the police chief, who was also in Umbrella's pocket, Jill was removed from the force and chose to continue her investigations on her own, the pressure slowly driving her to the brink of sanity until one night when everything changed. After passing out while elbow deep in her research, Jill wakes up at around 8 p.m. to a frantic call from her former teammate Brad, who's desperately warning her to get out of the city. Before he can explain, their conversation is abruptly cut short as her apartment wall suddenly explodes, and a hulking 8-foot-tall abomination sends her flying across the room. Jill immediately does the only thing that one can do in a situation like this and starts blasting. But it's no use because bullets don't seem to harm this thing, leaving her with no choice but to run for her life as it continues chasing her through the building. Jill narrowly escapes down to the next floor, where the creature cuts her off by ground-pounding its way through the ceiling like Mario on steroids. As she ducks under the rubble, it tries reeling her in with a tentacle that sprouts from its hand, but Jill uses a shard of broken glass to cut herself free. Just when she's nearly back to safety, the creature crashes straight through a brick wall, grabs Jill by the head, tossing her back into the inferno, and starts chasing her down the hallway, using a huge chunk of concrete like a battering ram. Luckily, Jill dives out of the building just as the floor above collapses, saving her from the creature for now. But this is no time to celebrate. Somehow, the virus contaminated the city's water supply, transforming nearly everyone into roaming hordes of flesh-hungry undead. And that's when she realizes that the nightmare is only getting started. Okay, I don't know if it's the fact that he can take several rounds straight to the dome without flinching, or that he just demolished an entire apartment building with nothing but his bare hands, but something tells me that this guy is about to be a big problem.
Right, let's do this.
Call me crazy, but I'd take your ordinary hordes of shamblers or even some sprinters any day over this walking apocalypse, whose only ambition is to follow me to the ends of the earth and stomp me into jelly. Now that we've seen what he can do, I think that it's about time we give him a proper introduction. This big fella goes by the name of Nemesis T02, or just Nemesis to his victims. Basically, he's what would happen if the T-1000, a zombie, and the Thing from The Thing somehow met and had a baby. He's more than strong enough to put Jack Baker in his place, and that's a fight that I think we'd all like to see. But until they get their own Freddy vs. Jason moment, let's just be grateful that we only have one human-shaped bulldozer to worry about for now. Nemesis here is the most successful product in a line of prototype super soldiers created by Umbrella that were infected with the same virus as the zombies, but also implanted with a nasty parasite to restore a significant amount of their brain function, giving them near human levels of intelligence. Now that he's all grown up, he stands somewhere close to 8 feet tall and weighs in at approximately 600 pounds. That's one big zombie. Right now, his one and only goal is to eliminate the surviving members of STARS and anyone else that gets in his way, covering Umbrella's tracks so that their connection to this outbreak will never reach the public eye. Along with possessing superhuman strength, speed, and agility, he's able to sprout tentacles that he can use to reel you in like Scorpion from Mortal Kombat, and grapple from rooftop to rooftop, Spider-Manning his way around the city. If you're really determined to fight him head-on, then it's going to take some serious firepower. The more that he's damaged, the more the parasite takes over, deteriorating his intelligence and transforming him into a more beast-like state. This hardly makes him less dangerous in a fight, but it does potentially give you the opportunity to take advantage of his animal rage by using strategies on him that wouldn't necessarily work if he was operating at full mental capacity. Clearly, Nemesis here is the main threat, but we can't forget about the mobs of zombies roaming the streets either. I think these are technically supposed to be infected, as after death, the virus reanimates their corpses, turning them into mindless, shambling ghouls. If you have to fight them, aim for the head. Easy enough, right? But unfortunately for us, these zombies are especially resilient, to the point where they'll even take multiple headshots before going down. The only way to kill them is by decapitation, completely destroying the brain or eliminating their entire body with fire or acid. So the key is to find a reliable weapon and make your shots count. If I were Jill in this situation, my only priority would be to get the hell out of town ASAP, and as far away from the big guy as possible. Jill might try hitting him with massive amounts of anti-parasitic medication or antibiotics, somehow exposing him to extreme heat or cold to kill the parasite from within, or stunning him and then surgically removing the parasite to literally cut out the source of his abilities. Easier said than done, but hey, at least it's a start. Now, those are all great ideas on paper, but one look at this guy tells you that trying to fight him should be an absolute last resort. For now, Jill needs to focus on getting out of the city in one piece. I'd try to find an abandoned vehicle that's still working and see how far I could get. It won't be easy, but it's better than sticking around. As they're fleeing from the zombies, the two of them are forced to take shelter in a nearby pub, but Brad ends up getting bit in the process and chooses to sacrifice himself so that Jill can escape. She manages to find a Glock on the body of a fallen officer in the alley out back, but with so many zombies flooding the streets, fighting them all isn't exactly an option. Her only chance is to find a way out of the city, and she gets her opportunity when the crew of a passing helicopter tells her to meet them on the roof of a nearby parking garage. But that was their biggest mistake. With Jill only a few yards away, the helicopter is suddenly knocked out of the sky by who else but your friendly neighborhood nemesis, leaving her stranded. Thinking quickly, Jill jumps behind the wheel of a car and floors it straight for him, sending them both careening back down to the streets below. Despite everything, Nemesis just keeps coming, but right when it looks like she's about to be turned into a Jill sandwich, a shaggy-haired hero named Carlos steps in to save the day, stunning the creature with a direct hit from his rocket launcher. Carlos quickly leads Jill into a nearby subway station, where he introduces her to the rest of his team. As part of a mercenary group hired by Umbrella, they've been sent in to evacuate civilians from the city, or at least that's what they think. They need to get the train running so that they can get the survivors to safety, and since Jill also needs a ride out of town, she agrees to help, although she doesn't exactly trust them after finding out who they're working for. Jill's first step is to restore power at the nearby substation, but getting there will not be easy. After making her way through a garage, Jill encounters an enemy that she hasn't seen since the first incident back at the mansion, a pair of zombified Dobermans. They're just as ferocious and much more agile than the zombies, but Jill manages to take them down and continue onwards towards the substation. When she finally gets there, she finds that the place has been overrun by a strange, hive-like structure that seems to be made of decaying flesh. It isn't long before she meets the creature who built it, as she's suddenly attacked from above and infected with the offspring of a repulsive mutated insect. Fortunately, she's able to kill the larvae before they hatch by swallowing some medicinal herbs, but she'll have to fight her way through the hive to restore the station's power. These freaks of nature are technically known as drain demos, getting their name from an ancient Greek deity who was considered the physical embodiment of fear itself. They're what happens when your average everyday flea consumes blood from someone infected with the T-virus, mutating them from tiny insects into terrifying creatures the size of a full-grown adult. These bizarre creatures survive by consuming nutrients from human body fluids, using their increased strength to overpower their victims and an elongated proboscis to suck out the juices. As an all-female species, they sometimes reproduce by forcefully injecting victims with their larvae. The only way to stop the larvae from hatching is by consuming one of those weird green herbs that are lying around and vomiting the creepy crawlies back up before it's too late. Worst of all, they like to use swarm tactics, which means that when you see one of them, another could be right behind you. The only good news is that they aren't nearly as resilient as Nemesis, or even the zombies. Explosives and fire can take out entire groups of them at once, although right now our offensive options are somewhat limited by the supplies that we have available. We'd need to use anything in the environment that could give us an advantage in the fight, like those exposed power generators to stun the bugs with electricity. We'll also want to constantly stay on the move, because remaining stationary for too long gives them the chance to group up and overwhelm you. But with that being said, she does need to find a way out of the city somehow. A giant can of insecticide would be great, but I don't know if there's enough anywhere in the city to get rid of these things. If it were me, I'd be calling Carlos and his squad in for help. They need to get out of this city just as badly as Jill does, and no one is going anywhere if we can't restore the power. If we have no choice but to go into that nest, then it would be helpful to have some meat shields. I mean backup. That should force the creatures to divide their attention between multiple targets. If they work together, then Jill could use Carlos and his team to draw the creatures' attention while she navigates through the substation and restores the power, allowing her to focus on the goal instead of constantly having to look over her shoulders for one of those bloodsuckers. Jill sets out moving as quickly as she can, winding through the tunnels and over catwalks while fighting off wave after wave of insects, until she's able to reset all 4 circuit breakers. Flipping the main switch, she finally restores power to the train full of refugees, and even fries the bug nest in the process, but she's not in the clear just yet. Next, she'll need to return to the subway office to set a course for the train. By cleverly using shortcuts, she's able to maneuver around the big guy and the groups of regular zombies, fighting through to the office, where she plots the train's route to a safe area and even manages to grab a shotgun on her way out. Before she can get far though, Jill encounters another new type of enemy, a corpse infected with a crab-like parasite that latches on to its victims' heads. By focusing her fire on the creature, she's able to kill both it and the host. Jill finally makes it back to the station, where she meets up with Carlos and 2 more of his teammates, Tyrell, who's cool, and Nikolai, who sucks. Just then, they hear Nemesis about to return for round 3, but they still need time to get the train ready, so Jill uses herself as bait to lure the creature away, escaping through the vents into the city's sewer system. When she finally gets a moment to breathe, Jill immediately tries contacting Carlos over the radio, but there's no signal down here in the tunnels, meaning that they won't be able to talk again until she finds her way back up to the surface. Unlike the streets above, the sewers are 100% zombie-free, and for a while, everything is quiet, until suddenly, a terrifying monstrosity that looks like some kind of cross between a chicken and a goldfish comes slithering out of the pipes ahead. It's disgusting, but Jill manages to injure the creature by firing into the exposed flesh when it opens its mouth to attack, eventually damaging it enough to take it down for good. Okay, who had Evil Kermit on their bingo card? At least we're not dealing with any more zombies or our buddy Nemesis for now, but these big slimy boys should be more than enough to keep us busy in the meantime. It looks like the only way out of these sewers is through these giant tadpoles. So it'd be helpful for us to understand what exactly they are first before coming up with a plan. These creatures are known as the Hunter Gammas, another product of Umbrella's genetic experiments. Not that I would know. After years of research and development working to perfect the T-virus, Umbrella had a pretty effective bioweapon on their hands, but there was just one problem. Despite their efforts, an approximate 10% of a given area's population was still naturally immune to the virus. And when you're going for complete global saturation, that just won't cut it. They needed a way to kill off that pesky 10% of survivors, and thus the Hunter Project was created. There are a few varieties of the Hunter series, another of which we'll encounter a bit later. The thing they all have in common is that they're a product of splicing human and animal DNA, using the T-virus to create a horrifically mutated apex killing machine. Thanks! The Gammas here were created by using the T-virus to bond human donor DNA to a fertilized amphibian egg, something that I can't even believe I just said out loud right now, and the product of which ended up looking just as repulsive as the idea sounds. As we've come to expect by now, these freaks are remarkably strong and highly resistant to damage, but what makes the Gammas unique is that they can even swallow their prey whole by unhinging their monstrous jaws. Going in for the attack forces them to expose their inner layers of flesh that aren't protected by their armored skin, and wouldn't be able to remain on dry land outside of the sewers for long. But since Jill is stuck down here and can't magically change the humidity, I might attempt to use their limited intelligence against them by luring out as many as I could and then hitting multiple creatures with one shot to maximize what ammo we do have. No, seriously, I could do it. The creatures also go into a sort of blind charge when they're attempting to swallow their prey, so it could be possible to bait them into accidentally attacking something dangerous, like corrosive chemicals or sharp debris. Although there are several ways to take them down, the important thing to remember is that we aren't here to play exterminator. Our only true priority is to escape the city, and the first step towards that is getting out of these sewers, and use the map that Jill found along with the following exit signs to find my way out. If she gets turned around, she could try following the flow of the water, as it may lead toward a treatment plant, or listening for sounds of life coming from the surface. Jill should also use the maze-solving strategy of sticking near the wall to make sure that she doesn't end up getting lost. Sure, we could waste ammo fighting the frogs, but personally, I'd prefer to let the Raccoon City Department of Public Works clear out their own sewers instead, since they're the ones who gave Umbrella the license to turn their entire city into a zoo for genetic abominations in the first place, that is. If there's even still a city to clean up once this is all said and done. Up ahead, there's an office where Jill collects some more supplies, including a freaking grenade launcher that the mad scientist who created these creatures was planning to use against them if things ever got out of control. It's a strange weapon to find down here in the sewers, but she's not complaining because the tunnels are absolutely crawling with the amphibious freaks, and her new arsenal allows Jill to fry them up like a Cajun barbecue. Navigating the tunnels, Jill fights her way through nearly a dozen more of the mutants, until she's finally able to find a ladder back to the surface. Good news, right? Wrong. Because no sooner does she get her first breath of fresh air than you-know-who suddenly grabs her by the skull like Shaq palming a basketball. And this time, he has a flamethrower. Running for her life, Jill flees into a nearby construction zone. But the only way to go is up, and her old buddy Nemesis is literally hot on her tail. By using the piles of construction materials for cover, she's able to circle around behind her opponent, avoiding his attacks while focusing her fire on the massive fuel tank that's strapped to his back until she finally manages to defeat him. With flames now engulfing the entire building, Jill manages to make a quick exit by leaping over the railing and crashing down to street level on a damaged construction elevator. It's not exactly the smoothest landing, but at least the big guy is dead, for sure this time. After checking in with Carlos, Jill starts heading back towards the subway station, winding her way through the streets. alleys, and even a few houses, all while dealing with any undead that gets in her way. Right now, she might be thinking that the worst is behind her, but that's when someone who we haven't seen in a while throws a giant flamethrower straight at the back of her head. Any guesses who? It's Mr. Nemesis, back from the dead for the, fourth time in one night. Jill's running out of ideas, but just then, Carlos calls her with one of his own, saying meet him outside of the station. As they duck through the security door, Carlos opens fire on a nearby fuel tanker, setting off a huge explosion and buying them time to get to safety. By now, we know that a little explosion won't be enough to take Nemesis out of the picture for good, but it should at least slow him down for a little bit. With the train finally operational, it looks like Jill is finally getting out of town. But as for Carlos and Tyrell, they have one last job to do. They're being sent back into the city to locate and rescue Umbrella Doctor Nathaniel Bard, who's been working on a vaccine that could stop the outbreak in its tracks. Speaking of stopping things in their tracks, the train hasn't made it 5 minutes down the line when the giant stalker from hell over here starts tearing the whole vehicle apart. In the chaos, the unit's leader Mikhail is grabbed by Nemesis, but he detonates a cluster of explosives at the last second, causing the entire train to derail as Jill is knocked unconscious in the crash. So much for that escape attempt. But for now, we can cut back over to Carlos and Tyrell, who are about to make a shocking discovery.
Okay, well, that didn't exactly go according to plan. Putting yourself in danger is one thing, but when your escape attempt leads to a whole train full of innocent bystanders getting Nemesis into oblivion, there's only one left to say, and it's Jill, you f***ed up. She's the expert on surviving these Umbrella experiments, but did we not learn anything from what happened to those poor helicopter pilots back at the parking garage? At every turn throughout the night, just when Jill thinks that she finally has things under control, Nemesis here shows up almost on cue to remind her just who's playing the predator in this game of cat and mouse. So what made her think that now would be any different? Maybe it's just me, but I think the most polite thing to do here would have been to at least check in with the other refugees who aren't wearing any plot armor, and see if they were cool with the idea of her hopping aboard while being pursued relentlessly by a rocket launcher wielding undead super soldier. It seems like everywhere Jill goes, untold destruction is sure to follow. And worst of all, that didn't even kill Nemesis. It just made him stronger. As she's about to find out for herself. Sorry, Jill, but you f***ed up.
The search for Dr. Bard brings Carlos and Tyrell to a familiar location, the Raccoon City Police Department. They're a few hours too early to run into Leon, but let's be real, even Nemesis wouldn't stand a chance if those three ever teamed up, so it's probably for the best. While Tyrell mans the computers, Carlos sets off for the STARS office on the second floor, where they're all hoping to find the doctor. After fighting his way through the building, Carlos is finally able to reach the relative safety of the STARS office, only to find out that our doctor is in another castle. Instead, he's taken shelter in the nearby hospital, but Umbrella seems to be cleaning house, killing off even their own researchers, so that no one can spread the truth about their involvement in the outbreak. Just then, Carlos gets a call from Jill explaining what happened to the train, and he rushes to her rescue, leaving Tyrell to go after the doctor for now. Meanwhile, Jill escapes from the subway tunnels and makes her way back up to the surface. As she's crossing a footbridge over the river, she watches Nemesis come staggering out of the tunnels completely engulfed in flames and tumble headfirst into the water. It looks like she's in the clear for now, when all of a sudden, the creature leaps out of the water and lunges straight for her. The massive damage that he's sustained over the course of the night causing him to mutate into a terrifying beast-like form. This version operates more on sheer brutal instinct than strategy, chasing Jill into the nearby square and forcing her to confront him head-on. Luckily, she's able to use the upgraded arsenal that she's acquired to slowly whittle him down one bullet at a time, narrowly avoiding his swipes and using mine rounds from her grenade launcher to stun him when he starts circling around by running across the sides of buildings. The two trade blows for what seem like an eternity, until finally, Jill is able to overwhelm the creature's regenerative abilities with a barrage of high explosives, decisively ending the brawl. Victorious, she carefully steps over the creature's body as she goes to leave the area. But the moment that she turns her back, Nemesis recovers and starts dragging her back towards the street. With a well-placed shot, Jill sends the heavy iron gate crashing down, severing the creature's arm. But as she tries to run, Nemesis quickly regenerates a new tentacle and pierces her with a nasty-looking barb, infecting her with the virus before both of them collapse to the ground. It's more than a half a day later by the time that Carlos finally finds her, but luckily Jill has managed to hold on. Thinking quickly, he radios Tyrell and tells him to meet up at the hospital, where they'll rescue the doctor and hopefully find a sample of the vaccine to save our super cop. Following the signs to navigate through the building, Carlos winds up coming to a staff room with dead bodies everywhere. And the huge claw marks on the walls are the first sign that whatever got to these researchers was something even worse than anything he's encountered before. He has to dig around for a while until he eventually finds a key to open the storage area and collect an employee ID card from one of the lockers. But as he turns back to the main hall, he suddenly comes face to face with the creature responsible for the massacre. As if zombies weren't bad enough, he's now forced to square off with this armed monstrosity known as the Hunter Beta. The creature requires a hail of bullets to bring down, but Carlos is able to get the job done without being torn to shreds. The only problem is that this was just the first of them.
Okay, just when I was thinking that we'd seen the worst of things, we've got a squad of bloodthirsty reptile men making their first appearance on the scene. Don't they know that there's already a whole host of other monstrosities at the party? Seriously, pick another apocalypse, you green freaks! Oh well, we know the drill by now. Time to figure out just what exactly we're dealing with and how we're gonna fight back. Just like the Gammas, the Betas here were created by Umbrella as a deployable bioweapon to wipe out anyone who didn't succumb to T-virus infection. Those freaks were born through an opposite process to the one of the Gammas, using the virus as a bonding agent to splice reptilian donor DNA with a fertilized human embryo, instead of the other way around. As you can see, the product is the stuff of nightmares. These betas possess superhuman strength and speed, allowing them to dash along walls and kill their victims with a single swipe of their razor-sharp claws. Their armored skin can only be penetrated with sustained heavy fire to expose the weaker flesh hidden beneath, or acid rounds to melt straight through. You know, Resident Evil. Fortunately, Carlos is well equipped to deal with these monstrosities and has a number of weapons in his arsenal that are capable of taking them down. But given just how much firepower that it takes, and that we don't know what else we might run into before the night is over, I'd still try my best to avoid getting into a fight with them whenever possible. Just like Jill, one of the biggest things slowing Carlos down is that he keeps running into locked doors that he has to find some way around. But with Jill about to become a zombie, there's really no time to waste. If I were in Carlos's position, I'd use his high-powered weapons to open up his own paths through the doors, windows, or right through the walls if possible. That way, he'll save a significant amount of time and lower the risk of being killed in a fight with any zombies or other creatures that are roaming the halls. Still hell-bent on saving the day, Carlos cuts a path through several of the hunters and even more zombies, until he's finally able to get to the doctor's lab. But what he finds there is not good. It looks like someone less friendly got to the doctor first based on the bullet hole in his head, which might be a bad thing if he weren't such a scumbag. But fortunately, the man's computer tells Carlos everything that he needs to know. It turns out that the doctor kept a few samples of the vaccine here in his office, while the rest are stored in a secret facility underneath the hospital. Sure enough, Carlos finds a sample hidden in the closet, which he uses to cure Jill after fighting his way back to the lobby, staying by her side until the vaccine starts to take its effect.
Sometime later, Tyrell staggers into the room, having sustained some injuries himself, and immediately turns on the TV without saying a word. According to the news report, they have less than 24 hours before the military nukes the entire city to contain the outbreak, meaning that any non-zombie who hasn't evacuated in time will also be killed in the blast. With Jill in recovery, Carlos sets out for the underground lab, hoping to find more samples of the vaccine and prove to the military that the virus can be cured before Raccoon City is turned into a crater. When Jill finally wakes up, Tyrell explains the dire situation, but instead of getting out of town like he suggests, Super Cop decides that she's going in. There's only a few hours left before the missile hits, but she's determined to find Carlos and put a stop to Umbrella, or die trying. Traveling through the hospital's basement, Jill eventually discovers a massive freight elevator that's large enough to hold several semi-trucks, and rides it down into a state-of-the-art facility where Umbrella had been researching all kinds of ghoulish tests on their nightmare creations. To her surprise, there's Nikolai silently watching her from an observation window. But when she attempts to ride the elevator up and confront him, Nikolai is already long gone. Just then, she hears someone approaching from behind. Luckily, it's only Tyrell, and the two of them agree to team up in search of Carlos and the vaccine. The path ahead leads them into a futuristic hallway, but unfortunately, their partnership is short-lived. Because, all of a sudden, Nemesis here says, "Forgot about me, did ya?" and impales Tyrell with a tentacle straight through the chest. It's over for him, and Jill's only choice is to run for the next room while the creature bounds after her, shutting the heavy blast door in his face just in time. Fighting her way past the undead researchers who are still roaming the halls, Jill comes to a laboratory where she can synthesize a sample of the vaccine herself. She'll just have to find the ingredients that are scattered throughout the rest of the facility. For the moment, the rescue mission turns into a scavenger hunt, with more of the zombies and other bizarre variants blocking her way. It's a brutal challenge, but with each and every step, Jill continues getting closer and closer to reaching her goal.
Jill's focused on making just one sample of the vaccine as a way to prove to the government that the virus can be cured, and that they shouldn't nuke Raccoon City back to the Stone Age. That's an important mission, but in case she hasn't looked around in a while, there isn't much of a city left to save, and only creating one sample of the vaccine could be a wasted opportunity. Instead, I'd try to get more than one of all the ingredients if possible, and use them to make as many samples of the vaccine that I could. These extras could be used against Nemesis by injecting him to counter the virus that's responsible for a large part of his power. It might even be possible for Jill to create an aerosolized version and deploy it through the facility's ventilation systems, exposing all threats within the base to the vaccine and hopefully weakening or destroying them outright. Finally, as cutthroat as it seems, I'd strongly consider leaving Carlos behind once we've got our hands on a sample of the vaccine. Time is running out, and what if she ends up making is the only sample in existence? Then risking losing it could mean disaster for the rest of the world. Carlos seems capable of fighting his own way out as it is, and although I'm sure that he'd appreciate Jill risking her life to save him, it's probably not what he'd want. So if she does decide to cut and run while she has the chance, then she can at least sleep easy knowing that she did what was best for the rest of society.
The last leg of the search brings her to an incubation room that's full of baby tyrants and hunter creatures. At first, they're all sleeping peacefully in their test tubes, but sure enough, when Jill circles back through after getting samples that she needs from the lab above, the hunters start bursting out of containment to attack her, forcing her to use the grenade launcher to take them out before the security doors will open, allowing her to exit the room. Finally, after battling her way through what seems like the whole facility, Jill returns to the lab and is able to synthesize another sample of the vaccine. Now all that's left to do is find Carlos and get the hell out of there. As she runs into the next area, Nemesis crashes through the wall and lunges straight for her, knocking Jill off of the platform. That's when Nikolai shows up and takes the last sample of the vaccine to sell to the highest bidder, stepping on Jill's fingers and causing her to fall down into the chamber where her mutant stalker is waiting to finish the job. The fight plays out much like it has before, but this time Jill has a friend. Her situationship, Carlos, shows up just in time, sending in a crane that Jill uses to ride up out of the chamber as he floods the place with tanks full of acid, boiling Nemesis into a big puddle of goo. Back upstairs, Jill confronts Nikolai as he's trying to flee the facility, but their argument is cut off when Nemesis crashes through the wall again, in the shape of a giant blob. This thing is horrifying, but by now Jill is good and fed up. Sending Carlos after Nikolai, she uses a massive railgun that just so happens to be in the chamber to blow a hole right through the creature's mouth and straight through the heavy steel walls of the facility, finally doing enough damage to actually take the big guy down once and for all. Catching an elevator back up to the surface, Jill finds an injured Carlos lying motionless out on the helipad. Nikolai suddenly attacks from the shadow, kicking Jill to the ground and destroying the last remaining sample of the vaccine. There's only 10 minutes left until the missile hits, so Nikolai's planning to kill off Jill and see himself out. But just as he's about to pull the trigger, Carlos heroically leaps into action, disarming Nikolai and holding him still so that Jill can take the shot. Lucky for them both, Jill has good aim and takes Nikolai down while leaving Carlos unharmed. With the missile closing in, they decide to take the helicopter for themselves and leave Nikolai to his fate. Our heroes manage to make it out of the blast zone just as the thermobaric missile strikes the city, destroying all evidence of Umbrella's crimes against nature. Although they've managed to survive, it's hard to consider this a victory, but Jill vows that same day she'll find a way to bring Umbrella down for good, no matter the cost.
Yo, do you with Resident Evil 3 like I do? This is like my favorite game ever, and I'm so glad that we got to cover it today on How to Beat. What'd y'all think? Let us know down in the comments below what you would have done. And if you know how to speedrun this game, get at me, because I can clear this game in under 10 seconds flat. But that's all for now. Leave a like and subscribe, and check out that How to Beat playlist for more videos just like this one. I'm that guy, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a damn good day.